Welcome to Digital Transformers, the show that connects you with what you need to build, manage, and operate your digital supply chain. Join your host in a timely discussion on new and future business models with industry-leading executives. The show will reveal global customer expectations, real-world deployment challenges, and the value of advanced business technologies like artificial intelligence, blockchain, and robotic process engineering. And now, we bring you Digital Transformers.
Hello, everyone. This is Kevin L. Jackson, and welcome to Digital Transformers on Supply Chain Now. Hey, what do you know about digital assets? How about asset tokenization or utility tokens? Well, according to research from Boston Consulting Group, the market of tokenized illiquid assets like real estate and equipment and land will reach about 16 trillion. That's with a T, $16 trillion by 2030. This represents like 10% of the global GDP. So if you're in any kind of business, this transition means a lot. And that's why we're talking with Court Welty, CEO of Intrana. So Court has spent over 10 years working in traditional financial markets as a broker, wealth management advisor at Merrill Lynch, a vice president at Barron's Best Advisor, and emergency senior loan officer working with the Small Business Administration and the Bank of America during the initial lockdowns of the pandemic. His in-depth knowledge of distributed ledger technology and finance spearheads the Intrana's team strategy and execution. So, Court, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. So happy to be here.
You know, your financial industry expertise is certainly impressive. Can you really share a little bit of how and why you entered the field?
I started as a broker initially. Before that, day trading caught my eye, and I really just liked the way that the numbers were very similar to music in a way. Market psychology is very similar to a lot of other things like sports, and it's very easy to kind of lose yourself in that world. And so I became a broker. Immediately decided that I wanted to be an advisor, so I moved on to Barron's Best, became the VP, and then when I started working at Merrill after that, it's kind of just luck of the draw that the pandemic hit, and we were asked to go and help. So a team of advisors was asked by the Small Business Administration to help distribute those funds, the economic injury disaster loans, as well as some of the paycheck protection loans. We did a really good job there, but I decided it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. Not necessarily because I didn't like helping people, but I saw a lot of inefficiencies and problems, not necessarily with the people that were doing the work, but with some of the processes inside of the business, inside of the finance world in general. And I thought that there might be a better way. Didn't know exactly how that was going to happen. But as I continued down my journey, looking into distributed ledger technology, it really kind of seemed like the only way for us to continue moving forward and provide sovereignty in the way that we expect and are used to inside of our financial markets.
You were basically in traditional finance, right? And then all of a sudden you started looking at this DeFi. And at that time, people really didn't know what it was and they were probably scared. Did they look at you like your head was turning around?
Yes. Yeah. So DeFi was something that was very scary to people, and rightfully so. There were a lot of promises made inside of the decentralized finance world that weren't kept and never were meant to be. There's a lot of bad actors inside of that space. There's a lot of lack of regulatory controls. And even more so, there is a lack of accountability. Obviously, anonymous activity has kind of a double edged benefit to it to an extent. We like to look at the way that decentralized finance currently exists as a nice proof of concept, but definitely not where we're supposed to be going. And as we start to see interoperability as well as tokenization, like we're talking about today, emerge, I really see those as some of the two main proponents for the next wave of growth inside of these markets.
So is that why you started Entrana? According to your website, you enable, quote, seamless tokenization of real world assets, making previously illiquid markets accessible. A lot of big words there. Tell us more, please. School us.
Well, if you think about the way that many of these businesses are just constructed, their technology, we call them data lakes. They have massive pools of data, but they don't necessarily have streams connecting them to the ocean, that massive body of information that is the internet, and should be freely accessible and quickly accessible. A lot of these businesses, in some ways, have authority over that data. And oftentimes they either lose that data, of which they don't have copies or redundancy for, or they mishandle that data in a way that they are actually lying. This technology I saw could replace a lot of things that we're currently relying on people to do. And it's not that we want to replace people. We shouldn't have to trust people in order to be able to transact business. We should have the tools that will allow us to, in a very trustless way, understand that everything is going to happen the way that we're being told on the screen it is. And when we look at the numbers that are coming out from the Federal Reserves, the Treasury, some of the debt implications that are happening overseas, Japan, United Kingdom, Germany, we're starting to see that many of the central banks, as well as the subprime banks, have had different lending mechanisms, as well as the reverse purchase agreements and purchase agreements that are forced upon them that haven't necessarily controlled credit and inflation the way that we had hoped. And a lot of that has to do with the inefficiencies that the technology inherently has inside of it. And blockchain is a way for us to kind of strip away the power from tertiary third party providers that are trusted to do the right thing. But in reality, their services are no longer required to be operated by a trust system.
So I'm a little confused here because I thought DeFi in the word is decentralized so that you don't really use or leverage these centralized financial authorities. So that sort of implies that laws go away. So people think DeFi is sort of illegal, but you saying something different in that you're working with or trying to leverage these central authorities. Can you explain that?
Yes, so we already have wonderful databases provided by Interpol, the FBI. We have tons here in America as well as overseas. And there's plenty of partners that are willing to work with people to make sure that even for the simplest things, such as KYC or anti money laundering, we can access those databases and actually pull against those registries to make sure we're not doing business. DeFi is the same way. We just have to make sure that we allow people to enter DeFi the right way. We have to know who they are. We have to know what banks they're coming from. But in a way, blockchain actually gives us a more auditable and trustworthy kind of source and trail of funds as well as activity inside of networks. Currently, you have to go to a bank and get a subpoena, and then you have to trust that that bank is going to give you every piece of information and that they haven't lost any of it. Right now, what tokenization allows for us to do, and what Intrana is focusing on, is allowing people to take custody and control of their own assets and their own data in a way that is controlled. Like you mentioned, we can't allow just anybody to go tokenize an asset and then all of a sudden they can operate with anybody else in a way that breaks all the laws that exist inside of their jurisdictions. So we've created jurisdictional labels. It's variable metadata that allows people to interact with assets as well as other assets that others hold in a way that is compliant with the region that they live in. CFTC, MiCA over there in the United Kingdom, Ireland, Europe, and then Vera for Dubai and the UAE. There's quite a few other jurisdictions that we're still working out how to work with, China, for instance. But you asked about borderless trade. We see a way for us to provide liquidity as well as seamless exchange of these assets and volume, tremendous volume, like you mentioned, trillions, to really start hitting these networks and showing that we don't have to spend tremendous amounts of money to move either verification that money is supposed to show up or actually get the money there in the first place. It's just a much better way to do it now.
So I guess this is associated with this, exciting new tokenization service that you just announced. Is that true?
Yes, it is. So the tokenization service itself is part of the work that we did at the NDS. That in and of itself is something that we don't believe anybody should have control over. We believe there will be a governing authority, but there shouldn't be a singular party that's benefiting from that or profiting from it. We believe that it is paramount for national security as well as personal freedom and sovereignty to have the option to self custody your assets and perhaps self custody a good amount of them. Not that we don't trust banks, not that we don't trust advisory firms or insurance companies, but we do understand that everybody's just a person and everybody makes mistakes. And blockchain is a good way for us to make sure that people don't make mistakes that have been being made for a long time. So that self custody aspect allows them to hold their own assets inside of an encrypted safe, if you will, on their phone, instantly retrievable, but private only to them, but still comply with the laws they need to, and then interact with the banks or the brokerages seamlessly when they need to, but only when they need to. Banks, yes, back in the Wild West days when we had, a wider trying to make sure that, there weren't a bunch of wagons getting run down. We absolutely needed banks. They were an important part of self-custodianship because it was so dangerous out in the world. But right now, thankfully, we don't have, a bunch of people on horses with 6 shooters trying to take our stuff. And so in that way, that we do have a better way to protect our data, even if someone were to take our phone to where they would not have access to it anyways.
Everything you've talked about it sounds really impressive and very complicated, but I really can't go much further before asking about the association with, I think this is right, El Chupacabra. Is that right? What? Tell the audience, what is that? Can you explain your relationship with this legendary creature?
So I grew up just hearing about the chupacabra. You better get to bed or chupacabra will eat you. But it's a myth, and it's supposedly an animal that comes and hunts livestock. Some people think it protects livestock. Some people think
Mm,
they're aliens.
Skinwalker Ranch kind of aliens?
Exactly. And we saw that there was a desire for generative art. And my sister is an artist, classically trained, goes back like 3 generations. And I kind of pushed her towards the digital art, and she made this collection. It's one of our consumer products, but it also represents the right to operate validators on our network. And what this does is it allows for them to then take a piece of their hardware, their machinery, and contribute to our network in a way that allows it to become more decentralized. And then they can start processing some of the transactions as well as handling some of the verification flow for our network such that it takes less strain for our servers to handle. The chupacabras there's 100 of them, and there's only ever going to be 100 of them. And it's a great way to participate in the network. They're just digital assets, but it's proof of authentication. And it's another concept that we're providing because we can now tie physical products like we have the chupacabras, the art, to a digital asset on chain and then track its movements in real life on chain. And this is just a proof of concept, but we can then start to apply that to oil and gas, different micropayments for instant deliveries. You start to see the way that even workers could get paid per load automated inside of the oil field delivering sand and pecan shells or inside of agriculture. There's a lot of automated application for this type of technology. So that's another good proof of concept with the chupacabras. And besides, they look really cool. My sister did a great job with the art.
Yeah, I really like them. My daughter is actually a digital artist, but kind of you know kind of understanding if I am a business person trying to deal with this right obvious transformation of financial services, what advice would you give? How do I sort of get on this tokenization wagon?
The good news is that we have a lot of services for different people, and it's a multitude of different industries. And so you can come see our solutions if some of them fit you. Immediately, you can get a license, and then you can start using our tooling. And we are not, charging an arm and a leg for what we're doing. We're trying to appeal to the masses. Small to medium sized businesses don't necessarily have $100,000, $200,000 to go and get a development team to build a custom app so that they can not only be competitive, but just safe inside of this quantum computing age. And that's something that a lot of people don't talk about is converting that backend database or at least protecting it with a shield. And it seems daunting to a lot of business owners, getting into advanced cryptography and which one is best and what blockchain network do I use. Good thing about us, you don't have to choose. You can, or you could be on none. There's a good way for them to replace all of the things they have, like Windows, for instance. So many Microsoft Office products can be replaced, file storage, Google Drive, in a way that's decentralized and allows for self-custody of that information, but also provides protection, because the last thing they want is to, delve headfirst into this type of thing and then not know where they're going. So my biggest advice to anybody that actually wants to be involved with the business and the actual just field of distributed ledger technology, even if it's just incorporating it for your business into doing what you already do, look at what we do, get a module, buy one of our services, get a license, or just look into what Constellation is doing. Look into what the NDF has in terms of some of the actual work groups that we have and the progress that we've made. There's a lot of really good models that are coming out, open source, that are going to be provided to the American people because it's important. We shouldn't really hold it inside of a golden chest away from everyone. We're going to be providing that for as many people as we possibly can. And it's not as hard as it looks. You just have to get started. And you definitely can do it if you own a business in America, because that's one of the hardest things to do.
I guess people taking control of their own information, of their own data, really being self-aware. Is this different? This is different than what we've done before, right?
It is. For the first time, we can actually take back a significant amount of power that is resting in the hands of corporations, for the
Mhm.
most part, that not necessarily have completely burnt our trust or don't deserve it, but maybe shouldn't need it. We rely and put a lot of faith and trust into attack vectors that currently are extraordinarily vulnerable. And those attack vectors being a lot of these corporations, that one of them goes down, their internal security. And I mean, we just saw every American lost their social security number to the dark web. That's a real threat. And we've been talking about it for 2 years, how it's going to happen because our legacy databases are no longer secure. This is one of those ways I think that we can allow people to participate in the top level of technology without really needing to know how to do it. They just need to know what it does. The rest is kind of up to us.
We live in kind of a dangerous world, and what you're talking about is putting more trust into tech companies. And anyone who does social media realizes that there's a lot of questions about what tech companies do with your own data. And as things expand, we found ourselves operating in this world without borders where countries, political divisions really don't control what you do. This is dangerous, right? I mean, does your approach reduce risk, enhance risk? Tell me about it.
Our approach 100% enhances risk for those that want to control others. Our approach 100% reduces risk for the American people, and it instills the values. We believe that our founding fathers would have used this technology in very specific ways. And although technology, for the most part, has been used to make a lot of money or control people or lead towards gaining power for very select few, this is a way for us to limit the power of technology companies infinitely and in perpetuity. This is a way for us to make sure that no longer do they own our data. No longer is it necessary for them to hold all of our assets. Banks are liquidity providers. They're not custodians. Brokerages are custodians if they're, high frequency trading. But I mean, if you have a long-term portfolio that you're not touching, I mean, it's an additional attack vector to have someone else hold that for you instead of it being an encrypted vault. It's important for people to understand that if one of these large corporations goes down, Fidelity loses their databases at $7 trillion that we don't know what happened to. And that's the retirements for a large portion of America, at least in terms of 401ks. And if something like that happened, those that chose to self-custody their information and their assets, they would be protected from that. This also protects people from government overreach. Now, obviously, there's going to be certain controls that we have to have in place to protect people. But on the other hand, this does prevent, let's say, some crazy thing happening and the government saying, all right, we're seizing farms or we're seizing commodities or we're controlling prices. This 100% prevents communism if enough people choose to use this solution.
Wow, wow. This is a kind of a new kind of freedom, isn't it? We hear this word being thrown around a lot, but it's sort of a different take on freedom. I kind of hear you. It's a new kind of Boston Tea Party, isn't it?
A little bit. And it's not that we think that law and order doesn't matter. We absolutely do. And that's why we're doing this, because law and order dictate that, 20 people should not be able to flip a switch and destroy half a country. And this type of technology makes sure that that isn't possible.
Wow. So we really appreciate your time today, but unfortunately, I mean, I could talk with you forever, but our time is kind of coming to an end. So, how can the audience reach out to you to learn more about this transition, this in financial services, if they have any questions?
So I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me at Court Welty. You can always find me on X or Twitter, however people want to call it. Intrana.io is a really great place for resources. You can also see the link for our work group there that leads to the NDF website for the National DigiFoundry. Please just send me an email, al@intrana.io. I answer pretty quick. And if you have something that you'd like us to work on or, help you with, we're more than willing to do that. As long as we have the bandwidth or the capabilities, we're there.
Oh, wow. So thank you very much for telling us and teaching us about tokenization and helping businesses, the small and medium-sized businesses especially, deal with this new world that we're in. So in closing, I would like to invite everyone to check out a wide variety of industry thought leadership at Supply Chain Now, where you can find digital transformers wherever you get your podcasts. So be sure to subscribe. So on behalf of the entire team here at Digital Transformers, this is Kevin L. Jackson wishing all of our listeners a bright and transformational future. We'll see you next time on Digital Transformers.
Thank you for supporting Digital Transformers and for being a part of our global Supply Chain Now community. Please check out all of our programming at supplychainnow.com. Make sure you subscribe to Digital Transformers anywhere you listen to or view the show, and follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time on Digital Transformers.